Thank you.
Were you going to say something?
Nope.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think we've said enough.
I'm going to make this difficult for you to edit.
Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video, and today I'm delighted to welcome the return of Richard McCook. Hi Richard.
How you doing, James? Good to be here.
Great stuff. So Richard and I have decided to do a video on a very nebulous theme, which we've been trying to hammer out over the last couple of months. We think we've finally done it, although we suspect we may have interpreted the brief slightly differently from each other, but we'll see. So the basic thrust of it, or this is the thrust that I've now decided it is monumental British hit singles. Now, what I mean by monumental is, I don't really know. I guess we're talking about, it could be influential, it could be just really great musically. The singles that stand out, when you try to take a bird's eye view over the history of rock music in the British charts specifically, what are the 10 records that you would say, right, these 10 particularly stand out for some reason? So if you had to explain to somebody who knew nothing about British pop and rock music and whatever, you know, the 1960s through to now, which 10 would you go, right, these are the 10 that you need to listen to? Does that, broadly speaking, chime with your understanding, Richard?
Similar, but not quite. I've picked 10 landmark singles, not necessarily British or British artists,
Okay.
that I think are a turning point for music in general,
Okay.
or a turning point for the artist. And it's a bit of a mixture of both. So that's the way I've done it.
Okay, so I think as well, I've chosen, I think all mine are British artists, and you have a couple of non-British artists, but it's still in the British charts though, isn't it? So they're still British hit singles.
They're still British hit singles, but not necessarily British.
Okay, and the final thing that we've done, it is a top 10. We're not going to rank them. We're going to talk about them in order of release. So don't think of this as being ranked with our top as the favorite. That's not how it works. It's when they were released. And also, essentially, we are showing 11 records because we've allowed ourselves the luxury of choosing 2 records by one artist in the list. And so we can mention 2 records by one artist, and that counts as one notch in our 10. Yeah. Okay, so let's hope that that everybody hasn't switched off by now. So after all that, so shall I start, or would you like to start? I mean, one thing we could do, we could start with whoever's got the earliest record. So do you want to nominate? Do you want to tell me what's your earliest?
1956.
Okay, you start then. You start.
Okay, right. I am going to pick this guy here. I'm not a huge Elvis fan, but I'm going to pick Heartbreak Hotel, which was the number 2 hit in 1956. Now, this wasn't the start of rock and roll, but this was the start of sex in rock and roll, really. Because if you think about it, if you have Bill Haley in the comments like Rock Around the Clock a couple of years previous, that was like your Uncle George singing a rock and roll song. This young guy here, who was gorgeous to the females, and I'm sure quite a few males as well, and even whenever they were filming them, they had to film from the waist up with that dance, and it was on the Heartbreak Hotel song. It changed rock and roll forever, I believe. I think this was the beginning of true rock and roll, and so it gets a pick.
Great stuff. Yeah, I mean, if I decided to do American artists, that would definitely be in my list as well. I'm starting British, so I'm starting later. Okay, so we don't know whether my next one is going to be before or after your next one, but I'll go with my first one, shall I? Now, I know I've missed out a really seminal British record by a British artist. I'll get to that at the end when I do my also rans. So I'll start off with my first one, and it's Ebony and Ivory by Paul McCartney. Oh no, hang on, no, that's just a joke. Let's start with a real one. Right, so I'm going to jump forward from your first record there to the 23rd of August 1963, and I did have to go back into with this one quite a lot between this record and another one, but I'm actually going to go with She Loves You by the Beatles.
Okay, right.
And I went back into between this one and I Want to Hold Your Hand for the simple reason that I Want to Hold Your Hand was the record which kickstarted the American Beatles phenomenon and basically changed the world. If you think of them doing it on the Ed Sullivan Show, it was a kind of absolute seismic cultural moment for the world. But what I thought was, let's keep things British and talk about the impact specifically on the British music scene. And I think She Loves You was the song which kickstarted Beatlemania in the UK.
I agree. So I do totally agree, which is why this is my twofer. I'm playing my Joker. It's She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand. So She Loves You for the British market, and I Want to Hold Your Hand for the American market. I know that From Me to You was their first #1, but really I think that She Loves You was the one that really cemented them as an act that was not going to be gone by the end of the year. And then whenever they went over to America and the Ed Sullivan show, as you say, with I Want to Hold Your Hand, that was it. They just blew out all proportions. So that's my #2, is my twofer. She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Right, so we have coincided. That's
yes,
marvelous.
Right.
Yeah, there's a great story about them recording She Loves You because the EMI Studios was being besieged by young female fans on the evening that they recorded it, and it was the first time that had happened, where the fans had actually basically completely surrounded the building and were trying to get into the building, and they were inside, you know, making this record, and it was the first time that I think they felt the true kind of pressure building, you know. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm going to jump ahead now then from 23rd of August 63, which was She Loves You. I'm going to jump forward to the 4th of August 1964. I'm going to have to show a CD for this one. And this one nearly didn't get in my list, but I decided I was going to put it in. And it's the Kinks and You Really Got Me.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
And I guess the reason I'm doing this one, it's meant to be the first proper, you know, guitar distortion song, isn't it? Legend has it that Dave Davis, did he accidentally punch a hole through his amp with his guitar, or maybe he did it on
maybe he did it on purpose. I'm not sure, but
yeah, he may have done it on purpose. Anyway, he got that kind of guitar shredding sound, and I guess, yeah, it was the first true kind of noisy, punky kind of English record, and it had a very great riff which really echoes down the centuries, really. I mean, think of Van Halen covering it, you know, back in the 1970s. It sort of was it kind of almost invented heavy metal in a way. So, yeah, I nearly didn't have it because I nearly had something else instead of it, but I did finally decide to go with it.
What the Hoople covered it as well as an instrumental on their first album from '69.
I did not know that.
Well, my #3 comes from 1965. And this is a greatest hits. I'm showing greatest hits so that you could nearly have a guess. And the song is maybe not the one you're thinking of, but I think I'm going to give it to Subterranean Homesick Blues. And the reason being lyrics. This is 1965 here. And he's coming out with lyrics like, don't want to be a bum, better chew gum, the pump don't work because the vandals took the handles. You don't get that in a pop song.
No.
And a top 10 pop song as well. You would maybe get it in slightly folkier type songs where you get a lot of lyrics. However, Subterranean Homesick Blues is not a folk song. It's a rock and roll song. It's a real rocker with lyrics absolutely thrown at you, a little bit the way Elvis Costello does, trying to get as many lyrics into the line as possible. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. And so it gets my choice. And #9 hit single as well.
Yeah, well, again, as with the Elvis one, if I'd been allowing myself to have American artists, then Dylan would certainly have been in it. Would I have picked that one? Possibly. I don't know. I might have picked something different, but yeah, I can absolutely accept your logic there. And it's nice to see Bob in the list, really, because he made such an impact on the British pop culture, really. So yeah, good call. Right, okay, so I'm going to jump forward now to 29th of October 1965. I should just say, I'm not sure about the chart position of You Really Got Me, but She Loves You was a #1 single.
You Really Got Me got to #1 as well.
Right, cool, okay, and this next one also got to #1. Sorry, I think I said the wrong date there. It's the 12th of the 5th, 1965, I'm going to go with now. And again, I couldn't really leave this one out, and it is I Can't Get No Satisfaction. By the Stones. The reason I almost didn't choose it was that it's such an American sounding record. I mean, it doesn't really sound like a British record of the day. It sounds, I think, clearly that's what their intention was. It was to try and sound American. The Stones were not like the Beatles. They didn't want to record in EMI. They wanted to go and record in, Chess or whatever, these studios in America. And they wanted an American sound. So I think of it as being this great American record, really. But at the end of the day, it's the Stones, British band, from London. And as American as it sounds, you can't argue with it. It is a British classic. So
it is, but it was also released in America a couple of months before it was released in Britain, which is weird for a British act. And my next choice is very similar in that it was released in America before it was released in Britain.
Interesting.
So
okay,
so my number 4 was recorded in December 1965. It was released in the UK in December 1966. But it was released in the US, I think May or June of 66. Now, this is a landmark single for the artist and I believe for music in general. It's an artist I very rarely show. And it's Donovan and it's Sunshine Superman. Now, if you think of Donovan before he recorded Sunshine Superman and listened to the first 2 albums, where he is really a Bob Dylan impersonator with an acoustic guitar singing really nice songs with a little harmonica. This is like the first ever psychedelic single, although not the first to be released. I think it's probably one of the first ones to be recorded. It was a huge hit in America, got to number 1, a huge hit over here as well, hit number 2. I like it, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But I appreciate that it is a landmark single. And there is another single that would, go up against this for being the first psychedelic single, which I'll come to in my bubbling unders at the end. But that's my number 4 choice, is Donovan's Sunshine Superman.
Very interesting. You took me completely by surprise by that. He's not an artist I considered for a moment. I did listen to a bit of Donovan over the summer. In fact, it was that album, which I've got on CD. And I really rate him, actually. He doesn't get a huge amount of good press, but nowadays, I think he's kind of seen more as a peripheral figure. He doesn't seem to have, his impact, I think, is often perhaps not appreciated.
He tended to change his voice as well after he did the acoustic stuff. He had a more slightly gravelly Dylan type voice, but he's got a very twee voice in a lot of those songs, which I'm not as keen on, but it's still it's a decent album. And Sunshine Superman is a decent song, but maybe not my favorite still.
Good choice. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm going to go to 29th of October, 1965 now. So this is my second choice from 1965. And again, a bit like the Kinks one, it was one that I couldn't really leave out at the end of the day. This was a number 2 British hit single in October 65. I don't have the single, but it's My Generation by The Who.
Of course. Yeah, very excellent choice.
And it was nearly that one or the Kinks one, and in the end I had to put them both in. But My Generation is a kind of mod clarion call, really, if you want to talk about British mod music and all the influences that stem from it, the Jam, and just absolutely countless people were influenced by it. But it's just the ultimate British kind of attitude-y, generation divide type record, really. And it kind of laid down the gauntlet, I think, in terms of being loud and boisterous and anti-establishment and all those things that you kind of want rock and roll to be. And I think it falls into that lineage of, okay, you got the Beatles did this, then the Stones did that, and then the Who kind of took it to its logical destination, really. And after that, really, everybody was just going to be imitators after the Who, because they were so loud, so powerful, so chaotic, and they basically embodied what loud British rock music was all about in the mid-1960s.
They went from mods to rockers, basically.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
So, which really makes me wonder about the Quadrophenia film as well, because it's the mods v rockers. Which side were the Who on?
Yeah. Well, I guess like all great bands, they transcended any label you try to put on them. I mean, where the Beatles really a Merseyside band. I mean, they came from the Mersey scene, but they quickly left all the other Mersey bands in the dust.
Well, I'm making a bit of a leap here. So I'm now in the 1970s.
Oh, okay.
1971, and there's no surprise that I'm showing this. and it's T-Rex and it's Hot Love.
Mm-hmm.
And now the reason I'm doing this, if you look at the very, very early 70s pop charts, they were a little bit like the very, very early 60s pop charts. Something had to be done. The album was now king, you know, with your bands like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and so forth. But there was really no sort of fun in the singles pop charts until this guy came along. And Ride a White Swan is not the song I'm picking, it is Hot Love. But Ride a White Swan was such an important song as well because it got Mark Bolan noticed. But then whenever the next single, Hot Love, came along, I've told the story a million times, it's a little glitter teardrop that was put under his eye in Top of the Pops. Glam rock was born and we had entertainment. That's what it is, pure fun. For 71, 72, 73 and part of 74, glam rock ruled the UK. Never did very well over in America, although The Sweet did quite well with a few top 10 hits. But for me, Hot Love was the start of it all and one of my favorite genres of music. So it definitely gets on. First one I ever picked when I'm doing this.
Well, I can say now I've got three nearly rans, almost made the list, and Hot Love was one of them. And I did come so close to putting it in for all the reasons that you just said. You know, the birth of glam rock. In the end, I've got a different song, which to me is going to represent that era. So I went for that one, and we may find you have that one as well. We'll see. But I did decide in the end, I couldn't quite squeeze in T-Rex, but I absolutely accept everything you say about that. The first glam single, really. And yeah, I mean, one of my all-time favorites. Good call. Okay, well, I'm still stuck in the 60s, Richard. You've leapt ahead of me. And this next one is going to be my double Jeopardy one, where I picked two records by the same artist, but I'm not going to count it as one of the 10. Couldn't leave it off the list, really, and it's Strawberry Fields Forever. And I'm not going to cheat and say Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane. I'm going to stick my pin in the mast and say we'll go for Strawberry Fields, even though I love Penny Lane. I think Strawberry Fields is a more adventurous record, really. It's got more, you know, avant-garde things going on. I hate that expression, but got to number 2 in the charts. Obviously, it wasn't a number 1 record. It was kept off number 1 by Engelbert Humperdinck, famously. But I think probably, I mean, it's interesting how you mentioned the Donovan record being the start of psychedelia, and you're probably right. I think of Strawberry Fields Forever as being the record that properly launched what you might call English psych music. Just the lyric, that kind of lysergic imagery, and the, you know, all the kind of sound manipulation, and just an incredibly psychedelic record, really. And you can imagine people back in the 60s, you can really imagine people hearing that for the first time and thinking, what the bloody hell is this? You know, all the mums and dads in the audience, basically, the people who tuned in to watch Magical Mystery Tour, you know, the next year, just looking at it going, what the hell is this? Complete subversion of normality. And don't think things were ever really the same again, really, after Strawberry Fields. So
that was the beauty of that single, because if you didn't like Strawberry Fields, you always had Penny Lane on the other side.
True. Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, if you ask me which song do I prefer out of the two, I would really struggle, because I love Penny Lane.
See, I'm a big McCartney fan, but I'm Strawberry Fields all the way. I think it's far better than Penny Lane.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just me.
Let's leave that for another day.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm now jumping to 1975 or 74, 75. I think this was a single in 75. I got to number 11, and it's non-British, but it's non-American as well. Kraftwerk and Autobahn. Now, have you ever heard, in 1974, nobody had ever heard anything like this before. Okay, you've got Chicory Tip doing Some of My Father, which was a little catchy thing with the whatever synthesizer it was. But this is your German krautrock that nobody had ever heard over here, and it was David Bowie just ate this stuff up. Now, this is 3 years before Low, and it's an absolutely wonderful single, and it did do well. As I say, got to number 11, and it's truncated form like this here is, I think, it takes up the whole side of the album, which is very, very good. But yeah, I think this is a turning point as well for electronic music, and definitely a landmark single. So Autobahn gets my number 6.
Yeah, great choice. Yeah, I mean, Kraftwerk really crossed over into the mainstream in a way that most of those German bands didn't. I mean, how many people in the general music listening population know about, Can and Cluster and Harmonium and all those bands? Whereas Kraftwerk I mean, they were pop stars, really, weren't they? Complete game changers, really. I'm afraid, Richard, I am still in the 1960s, so you really have gone ahead of me. And you've also skipped something that I genuinely thought you would have in your list. So, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay, so I'm now in, let's see, 12th of the 5th, 1967. So this is shortly after Strawberry Fields, not long after. Can you guess what it is? It's from a similar tradition.
We Love You by the Stones. Oh, not The Laughing Gnome.
No, this is Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum.
Of course. Oh, fantastic.
So this one, it was a deep struggle between this and Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues. But I did finally decide that Whiter Shade of Pale probably has more reach and is a bit more timeless. I think Nights in White Satin, it's got that kind of slightly kitsch thing going on. It's a great song, but it's definitely a kind of 60s kitsch, slightly novelty single. I don't want to run it down. I love it. It's fantastic. But Whiter Shade of Pale, it just has that kind of timeless Bach organ. And it's been used in so many things. Think of With Nail and I. It's used in the opening sequence of that. And it was a #1 British single. And it's one of those records that just laid the groundwork, I guess, for what you want to call it, art rock, orchestral rock. And I just think it's just an incredibly atmospheric record. And it does belong in that time period, but it also seems to transcend as well. And I think they're one of those bands where people really only know that one song.
Yeah, well, I only know 2, really.
Yeah.
I know Homburg as well, which is very good.
Yeah, I have one greatest hits album by them, and I bought it last year, I think, or this year even, and I just listened to it and thought it's incredible. I've got to the age of whatever it is, 51, and I still only really know that song because it's so famous and so timeless. And obviously, they had other songs, yeah. But I couldn't leave that one out, so that's going in, Whiter Shade of Pale, and that is, I think, my final single of the 1960s.
Well, I'm still in the 70s and I'm still in 1975. And this one was a landmark single, not only for this group, but I think for white artists in general, because this is disco. This is disco. They say it's R&B, but I'm going the Bee Gees and Jive Talking. Now, the Bee Gees' last couple of albums sold nothing. They did nothing in America as well, and they couldn't give away their records. And they wrote Jive Talking and they sent it to, I think it was either New York radio stations, but not with their name on it. And the DJ started playing it, not knowing it was the Bee Gees, and it became a big club hit, and then it became a big hit, and then it was found out it was actually the Bee Gees. And this is the start of Saturday Night Fever, really. 3 years before Saturday Night Fever, because this is 75. It's really, whenever you got the disco hits in the mid-70s, was usually the black artists like your George McRae and all the rest of it, which were brilliant. Now, Bowie did do Young Americans, but that was a little bit more soulful. This is actually pure disco, Jive Talking, and it gets my number 7 because of it.
I'm so pleased that you put that in, Richard. I had a previous version of my list, and I actually had Night Fever in there.
Yeah.
Because obviously that was a massive single and kind of was the start of disco as a true big mainstream thing. But then it occurred to me when I put that on, I thought, really, it should be Jive Talking rather than that. And then I kind of lost my nerve, really, with the whole Bee Gees disco thing. Maybe should have stuck to my guns with it, because I think disco, you can't kind of argue with disco. It was hated in America by lots of people, but I think in this country, it didn't seem to invite that same level of hatred. It was just embraced as just another form of pop music, really. And the Bee Gees rode that wave, obviously, to the very top of the pile, didn't they?
And for them, it was a number 4 hit. And I think the previous hit was something like Run to Me back in 72 or My World in 71, which were slightly sappy ballads.
Yeah.
This was fantastic sort of dance song. Top 5. That's why I picked it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give this away now because I'm not going to include it in my also rans. But when I had Night Fever on my list, I also had Paranoid by Black Sabbath.
I was nearly picking it.
Yeah, because I thought, well, you've got the disco thing, and then you need really to acknowledge, you know, the coming of heavy rock or whatever, heavy metal, and Paranoid was the one that I came up with. But again, that was the version of the list I ended up losing the Bee Gees and Black Sabbath. But you know, on a different day they could have been in there. But c'est la vie. Okay, so I'm now into the 1970s, and this is the one that I'm genuinely surprised you didn't put in. 28th of the 4th, 1972, a number 10 single, and the artist in question is David Bowie. And I ummed and ahed about this because I wanted to put Space Oddity in because I think it's such a landmark pop single. But at the end of the day, it was pre-fame, although, I mean, clearly it made him famous, but I think it was a sort of novelty single, bit of a kind of like a one-off almost. Whereas I think because of the Top of the Pops appearance with Mick Ronson, I think I'm going to have to go with Starman. So the story there is they make this incredible appearance on Top of the Pops, and so the legend would have us believe every single school playground the next day was full of kids all talking about this thing between Bowie and Mick Ronson, you know, leaning on each other, just the androgyny of it all. And again, this is why I ended up not putting Hot Love in the end. I thought, well, I'm going to put Starman in, you know, the glitter scene, the glam scene, that is going to sum that up really. So that's why I went for that.
You see, I'm the opposite. I went Hot Love instead. I considered Starman, but then I thought if there had been no Hot Love, would there ever have been a Starman?
Mm-hmm.
Because the Hot Love really started all that glitter rock up, so I left it off.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Okay, my number 8, and this is probably the most obvious one from 1975, and I wonder if you can guess what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, the reason I'm picking this is not because of the success of Bohemian Rhapsody, but really, if you look at 1975 and you look at the album Night at the Opera, you would think that Bohemian Rhapsody is an LP track. Do not release that as a single. It's like 5 different sections in the whole song. It is going to flop. And thumbs up to Kenny Everett for really, really promoting it. And so you have your a cappella start, and then you have your piano ballad, then you have your operatic bit, opera and a pop song. Then you have your heavy bit, and then you have your wind down bit. So 5 distinct sections. That's never happened before. Okay, you've had long songs like Hey Jude was over 7 minutes long, but you get 5 sections inside, I think it's 5 minutes and 50 seconds. And the sales just showed that that's what people were looking for, something different. And it has to get on it. It was one of my first ones as well that I picked. So Bohemian Rhapsody, without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, Richard, I've got a bit of a confession to make here. It's not in my list, and I know that's crazy. There's two reasons for that. The first reason is I genuinely knew you would choose it, and even though sort of the idea of this video was let's see if we can coincide, I thought also, well, there's no point really. I know for a fact you're going to put it in. It's almost like, what's the point of me putting it in? It's like it's just a shoo-in, isn't it? So I decided to go for an alternative to Bohemian Rhapsody from the same year.
Oh, so that's
and I knew that you wouldn't choose it.
I Am Here.
No, not by Queen. No, I don't have Queen in the list. I don't have Queen in the list. So I've got the other song from 1975, #1 record by a band that's often.
I know it is. 10cc.
Yeah.
Not in Love. Yeah.
So I sort of knew that you wouldn't pick this. I knew you'd probably pick Bohemian Rhapsody. So I went for this one. I'm Not in Love. It's just another one of those timeless songs. Yes, it's not like Bohemian Rhapsody, so you don't have that thing where it's 5 songs rolled into one. But what you do have really is the beginning of sampling. Really, I mean, all the tape loops, all the analog tape loops. It was such a technological marvel at the time, vastly influential. So many people. From Wayne Coyne of the Flaming Lips through to R.E.M. through to just countless artists have lined up to say I'm Not in Love is just one of those records that is clearly very, very special. Now, it is a little bit soppy and a little bit weepy and a little bit kind of mainstream soft rock. I get that totally, but I couldn't really resist having it in. 1975.
The production of it is perfect. The production is wonderful. It's one of the most beautiful sounding records.
Yeah. So May 1975. I think it predated Bohemian Rhapsody, but the two bands were probably recording them at the exact same time as each other, which I find really interesting.
Yeah. Right, my number 9, and we go to December 1976.
I can't believe that we've not coincided once yet, have we? Oh no, apart from
Beatles.
Yeah. Okay.
December 1976, and a number 38 hit, Anarchy in the UK. Now, not necessarily the first punk single in the UK. I think that was New Rose by the Damned, but this was the first one that got attention, and especially with that Bill Grundy interview on, was it ITV or one of those shows anyway.
Did you know that the reason that they did that was Queen couldn't turn up? Yeah, Freddie had a dental appointment and couldn't make it, so they got the Sex Pistols in instead. It basically ended Bill Grundy's career, and the show got cancelled, and he ended up just being put out to pasture pretty much, you know.
But do you not think that Bill Grundy really did egg them on?
Yeah, totally.
He mostly ended his own career. I think they would have been okay about it. A bit of an awkward interview, but
yeah.
But yeah, ground zero for music. The end of 1976 had to happen.
Yeah.
So in the UK.
Well, I've got the date here because number 9 here, 26th of November 1976, got to number 38 in the charts.
Oh, same.
Anarchy in the UK.
Oh, yes, excellent.
Yeah, so that's 2. We've Beatles and Sex Pistols. We both managed to coincide with that. So that's my number 9.
Before we show number 10, is yours from the 70s or the 80s?
Well, yeah. So I can confess now. Oh no, actually no. Okay, so originally my list did not go up to the 80s. Then I changed. So my number 10 is 1980.
Right. So we're not going to match. Okay. Mine is 1983. So do you want to do yours first? This is 1980, and then I'll do mine.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so I'm going to have to show a CD for this. Let me just check I've got the right way around here. 27th of October, 1980. Got to number 15 in the charts, and it is The Ace of Spades by Motorhead.
Fantastic song.
And this literally occurred to me when I was walking the dog this morning. I was going onto the field with the dog thinking, there's something missing from this list. And all of a sudden, I just thought of The Ace of Spades. I thought of them doing it on The Young Ones. And it's just one of those songs that everybody has heard of. You know, your mum's heard of it. Your grandma's probably heard of it. I mean, they probably hate it, but they've heard of it. I think its greatest achievement is being such an obnoxious kind of song that everybody knows. I mean, most obnoxious songs, they tend to just to stay underground, don't they? You know, liked by teenagers and whatever, kind of underground. But this is one that's somehow so strong as a song. I mean, it's been covered by people. It's been done in all sorts of styles, you know, country and western and everything. I think if you dig beneath that kind of squally, nasty, you know, annoy your parents kind of sound, there is just a great timeless song there, really. And I think it was Lemmy's crowning achievement, really. It's the one song that he will always be remembered for. What other Motorhead song really is ever going to be remembered apart from that one?
I always think of The Young Ones as well whenever you mention the Ace of Spades.
Yeah,
because one of the best parts of The Young Ones was whenever they were on doing it. Okay, my number 10 is from 1983. Now, this is, I believe, a landmark single. Maybe not for the best reasons, because I think the 80s changed after this single. This was cut off. Because if you look at the early 80s, 80, 81, 82, they weren't that far away from 78, 79. But from 1984 onwards, the sound of the 80s, that so-called sound that we don't like, came along. But I don't think you're going to be happy. And it's Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
I know, that's good. Relax.
Now, I do like this, and this is a Trevor Horn production, as you well know. And it's the same with the next single, Two Tribes. But this took disco into the clubs, more like, rather than a disco, which is a very sort of pure dance. This is sleazy, and everything is thrown on the production in this. I do like it, but it influenced so many other acts in the 80s, and the sound got worse and worse and worse. High Energy would never have happened without this here. Stock Aitken and Waterman would never have happened without this here. So this, to me, is the landmark of the start, really, of the bad sound of the 80s, although I do really like this record. But what happened afterwards, because of this, I'm not too keen on. So,
what made you think that I wouldn't be happy with that?
Because Trevor Horn produced it. I know you're a huge Trevor Horn fan.
Yeah.
I think as the result of that, I'm not happy with. You know, I just don't. I think music fell apart after that.
Oh, I see.
A lot of artists, not for the good.
I see. So you meant that I wouldn't be happy with the idea that Trevor Horn had kickstarted something which was generally not very good. I see. Yeah. I thought of Frankie. I mean, I did think a Video Killed the Radio Star as well, but that was too much of a kitsch sort of novelty song. But again, I would argue that it had its influence. But yeah, well, your final choice, I think, is braver than mine. Mine is a bit of a cop-out. My final choice is definitely a bit of a cop-out. And I do have the single to show. The reason it's a cop-out is that it wasn't really a big hit when it was first released. And in fact, it was released at least 3 times. When it was first released in 1975, it was to tie in with a compilation album which this artist had put out. And I think it only got to maybe number 6 in the charts. Mm-hmm. It only became a big hit in 1981 after he died. And I couldn't really leave it out. I wanted to put it in because I just think it's one of those songs which is just in the culture. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Not everybody likes it. It's got its critics, but I do think that any list of top 10 British singles of all time that does not have Imagine by John Lennon, I couldn't quite live with that. And it was only a number 1 hit in 1981 after his passing. But I think after he died and it became a hit, it just became one of those songs. Just everybody in the world knows it, knew it. And I personally don't have an issue with the song at all. I think it's a great song. You know, some people say that the lyrics are sanctimonious or, you know, whatever, unrealistic. But think of that video, the white room and him sat at the piano. I mean, you can't get more iconic than that, really. So, yeah, had to have it, Imagine.
No, I agree with you. The only thing about Imagine I do not like is somebody covering it. I cannot bear to hear anybody cover that song. Now, I have a version of David Bowie covering it whenever he performed it live in '83 from Montreal. And I can't bear to listen to that either. And then whenever you got those Zoom callers a couple of years ago, you know, singing along to it, dreadful, absolutely dreadful. But the song itself with John Lennon singing, yes.
Yeah.
It's one of the very few songs nobody should even attempt to cover.
Did you know that ELO did it on the Time tour?
Oh, no. Yes, I did actually. I got a very, very bad MP3 of it, but
not good.
No, not good at all. But now I have got a couple of bubbling unders.
Okay, go for it.
Right. Now I should have mentioned this because one of them is the one that you brought up, and it was the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction.
Okay.
I actually put in Subterranean Homesick Blues instead.
Okay.
Mostly for the words of Satisfaction. I've also got the Byrds' 8 Miles High, which is the one. It's probably the first released Psych single, but I picked Donovan instead. And the last one, this didn't change music, this just changed the fortunes of a band, and I want to include it. And it's the Slade Live at Reading EP, because Slade could not give away their records. You know, they were playing working man's clubs, and they weren't even filling them in 1979. Now, this is a band that had 6 number 1 hit singles and 3 number 1 hit albums 6 years previous, and they could not fill a working man's club. And then when Ozzy Osbourne couldn't make the Reading Festival, Slade came on and went down a treat. And then I think Def Leppard came on after them and died a death because these guys were so good. And this is the Live at Reading EP with the lead-off track, When I'm Dancing, I Ain't Fighting. So this was the landmark single for them. And they did get some more success in the 80s then. They had 3 more top 10 hits and 2 more top 30 hits, so they did okay.
Well, I briefly thought of Come On Feel the Noise. That was briefly on, I don't think it got on a list, but it kind of crossed my mind when I was thinking about those big sort of sing-along pop anthems from the 70s. But okay, I'm pleased that Slade got a look in.
Good, of course.
Yeah, well, I think I've mentioned one of my what ifs. That was Hot Love, which is what you had. There was one that I did think I probably should mention. I felt a bit uncomfortable starting with the Beatles because it occurred to me that Move It by Cliff and the Shadows is seen as being the first proper British rock and roll record, which I think it is. But I just figured, well, it was a bit of an Elvis imitation, really. It was him basically totally imitating the American sound, wasn't it? So that's why I kind of started my list with She Loves You, because to me that is the first proper huge British record which has a distinctly English flavour to it. But I think Move It has got its place in history. And the one I sort of wish I had, but I couldn't honestly finally get it in there, was Wuthering Heights.
I thought of that as well. I was going down the first female song #1 route, and best single ever. I should have had it, but couldn't get it in.
No. I also had Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Floyd briefly, because it was one of those songs, a bit like the Starman thing, where you're going to school the next day and just everybody's talking about it. All right, Richard. Well, that was great fun. Thanks very much for joining me on that odyssey through the great and the influential records of all time.
Thanks for having me, James. It was good fun. It was a bit of a headache as well, preparing for it, but we got there at the end. I enjoyed it.
Great stuff. All right, so over to you now, viewers. Let us know what you think of our lists. Did we leave anything out? Did we include anything that you think shouldn't have been included? Do feel free to leave us your own list of the 10 most monumental or landmark British hit singles of all time, and we'll be delighted to give those a read and reply in our own good time. So it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Richard. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, James. Bye.
Bye.